The engineering was limited from the management. The engineering was limited from the management.
Hey guys, welcome to Connecting the Dots, the channel where we follow the breadcrumbs and try to predict where disruptions will take us. My friends, I feel betrayed. I grew up at a time of serious competition among German car makers. Mercedes were engineered like no other car in the world. BMW was the ultimate driving machine, and Audi was the dark horse charging from behind and trying to catch up with the big guys with its Quattro pedigree and a firm belief in making progress through technology. German cars set the standard for engineering, luxury, and safety, and most of all, they delivered an unrivaled driving experience. Whenever they entered a sector, they either dominated it or were at least very competitive. And rightly so, with rival companies constantly stepping on each other's toes in the crowded German market, competition was fierce, and trying to get an edge over competitors kept German cars at the forefront of engineering. But then things went horribly wrong, and I feel betrayed. And by the end of this video, I promise you that so will you. This video is split into two segments. First, we'll dive into the murky waters of the German auto industry, dissect the thin line between competition and collusion, and find out why BMW intentionally held back when making the F-Series M3s, creating one of the least loved M3 generations. Then, we will broaden our scope to the global scene. We'll expose how much you and I overpaid throughout the years for our cars, and we will check the integrity of industry giants like Bosch, Magna, and Denso compared to that of your local used car dealer. Want to guess who will win? Patrons make this channel possible, so a quick shout out to my latest patrons: Roger W., Bob S., Frank K., Paul T., Wade B., Patrick M., and DLM. You guys rock. And now buckle up and get ready, because we are about to discuss unbelievable levels of collusion. And one thing I promise you is that it won't be boring. The first part of this video is based on the article The Kartell: Collusion Between Germany's Biggest Car Makers by Frank Domen and Dietmar Hauerneck from Der Spiegel. It starts with emissions collusion, but then it evolves into so much more. Sometimes big things are hidden behind much smaller things. For instance, one of the biggest secrets of the German automotive industry lies behind the mechanism that opens and closes a convertible top at the push of a button. Daimler, BMW, Audi, Porsche, and Volkswagen are engaged in cutthroat competition to produce the best cars. At least, that's the story we are told. Car companies, magazines, and politicians all sell us a narrative about market economy and competition among companies. But the narrative is wrong, and a good example of this is the convertible top. The 5 automakers did not compete over which company could offer its customers the best top. On the contrary, the 5 automakers coordinated their actions in numerous meetings. For instance, they determined the maximum speed at which a driver could open or close the top. There will be no arms race when it comes to speeds, read the minutes of a meeting. As a result, all soft tops on convertibles made by the 5 companies can only be opened and closed at speeds of up to 31 miles per hour. The agreement to stop competition and market forces on soft tops was reached by the so-called Working Group for Mechanical Attachments. But there were many other working groups between the 5 German automakers. There were working groups for braking, control systems, seating systems, air suspensions, clutches, gasoline engines, and diesel engines, you name it. They agreed on technology, specs, suppliers, and even pricing. Everything small or large was decided under agreement. While many of the occurrences I will show in this video resulted with fines, most fines were given by settlement with no admission of guilt. For this reason, everything I will show here is opinion only. I'm not saying anyone is guilty of anything, just that, in my opinion, they are guilty as hell. Der Spiegel's report concluded that Daimler, BMW, Audi, Porsche, and Volkswagen often stopped competing with one another. Instead, they secretly cooperated very closely in the same way that subsidiaries of a single company like Chevrolet, GMC, and Cadillac work together. In other words, they formed a cartel. 4 of the 5 companies have admitted this to European authorities. In a brief from 2016, Volkswagen voluntarily disclosed their participation in what they called suspected cartel infringements. According to VW's statement, the 5 companies have coordinated matters relating to the development of their vehicles, costs, suppliers, and markets for many years, at least since the 1990s and to this day, meaning 2016. The cartel didn't just hurt competitors, it also hurt customers, suppliers, the general public, and ultimately also shareholders. What started in the 90s in very small scale grew to become one of the largest cartels in German history. A cartel called the Circle of Five. The development experts at the German auto companies met regularly several times a year. They met in Stuttgart, Munich, Ingolstadt, and Wolfsburg, and at the major auto shows in Geneva, Frankfurt, and Paris. There is the suspicion, as Volkswagen stated in its brief, that there was behavior in violation of cartel law. When a car company itself voices the suspicion that it may have violated laws, the evidence must be very clear. And it is. Sometimes cooperation among Daimler, BMW, Audi, Porsche, and Volkswagen worked more effectively than that among departments of a company. Experts from each automaker were assigned to working groups, and even sub-working groups, classified according to the following development areas: engine, car body, chassis, electric, electronic, and total vehicle. Litigation focused on emissions, so let's start there before discussing collusion in other groups. VW's self-incrimination statement offers an insider look into Dieselgate and the world of intercompany collusion. It provides surprising answers to questions like why none of the German automakers could comply with emissions limits for diesel cars without resorting to deception, and why BMW held back on their F80 series M3s, making them one of the least loved M3 generations. The manufacturers stopped competing via progress through technology. Essentially, they stopped competing at all. In numerous meetings, they coordinated the size of tanks for AdBlue, a urea mixture used to clean emissions of diesel engines by splitting harmful nitric oxide into its harmless components of water and nitrogen. Large tanks would have been expensive, so Daimler, BMW, Audi, and Volkswagen agreed to use small tanks. At some point, the amount of AdBlue the tanks contained was no longer sufficient to adequately clean exhaust gases. With more than 60 working groups and more than 1,000 meetings, it makes sense to pause for a moment and ask, excuse us? What exactly was going on in an industry that, for decades, was considered a symbol of the strength of German industry? Weren't the CEOs of these auto companies constantly pointing out how fantastic competition was, especially among the German automakers? Commenting on the fact that Audi, BMW, and Mercedes together held about 80% of global market share in the premium segment, Daimler CEO Dieter Zetsche said that one of the reasons was that as neighbors, we are constantly stepping on each other's toes. And in this sense, competition is an incredibly good thing. As BMW's CEO Harald Krüger said, this competition constantly motivates us to achieve excellence. Let's watch an amazing ad that BMW prepared congratulating Daimler CEO Dieter Zetsche on his retirement. So they talk of competition and take jabs at each other, but was it just a show where they played customers and fans as suckers? Of course, despite the cartel, there still was some competition between the five, and there were also cases where cooperation was allowed. But beyond that, the companies stopped competing in many areas of vehicle development, and it's no chance that BMW released an exciting M3, the G80, only after the collusion bubble had popped. The companies have been coordinating their efforts in numerous meetings and conference calls since 2006. There were agendas and minutes of these meetings, and sometimes the participants even joked about the aspect of confidentiality. One Audi email, for example, reads, "Hello everyone, here is the information on the secret meeting in Munich. In my tech-filled life, earbuds are indispensable, so with every new pair, I wonder whether they will deliver. But I've never been as excited about them as with Raycon's everyday earbuds. Before everything, they are beautiful. I don't normally say this about earbuds, but they truly stand out. Mine are a deep metallic blue, and my wife's white ones have a chic aluminum insert in the case, both extremely stylish." Raycon, the sponsor of this video, focuses on providing premium audio at an affordable price. They're used by musicians such as Snoop Dogg and athletes like J.R. Smith, but more interesting is how they perform in real life. They have 8 hours of playtime, or 32 with the case. They are IPX6 water resistant, and with Bluetooth 5, they connect immediately and hold stable connection even from another room. Earbud buttons provide the easiest and most complete control I've ever experienced, leaving hands-free with no need to whip out the phone. They are very comfortable, and I use them for hours. And as for sound quality, when my wife first tested hers, she put on a song, went quiet for a while, and once the song ended, told me it reminded me of how much I love this song. I think this says it all. Use my link buyraycon.com/ctdots and enter the code MADNESS to get 20% off. Raycon are offering a 30-day risk-free trial and a 1-year warranty, so you have nothing to lose. Visit buyraycon.com/ctdots and experience them yourself. The starting point was the debate over the increase in greenhouse gases and the fear of global warming. Calls to limit CO2 emissions became more and more vocal, and the automobile industry came under fire. Toyota had a response in the form of hybrids. The German automobile industry had nothing comparable to offer in this area. Instead, it chose to use diesel engines, which are more fuel efficient than petrol cars and emit less CO2. But diesels produce nitric oxides, which cause air pollution and failed to meet stringent regulations that were in the pipeline. The 5 German automakers decided to go on the offensive. Under the motto, "Clean Diesel," nitric oxide emissions were to be reduced with a technology used in trucks, the injection of urea. This realization should have started a race among automakers over which company could employ the technology in its vehicle faster and more effectively than the others. Instead, the 5 companies discussed this in their working groups. A review found that they were using different tank sizes for AdBlue. The working group of chassis managers concluded that this was absurd and that all companies urgently needed a coordinated approach to tank sizes. Posting this as a recommendation could have been fine, but they saw it as unacceptable that each manufacturer did as it pleased in this issue. And tank size was important. The larger the tank, the more AdBlue can be injected and the more effectively nitric oxides can be reduced. A large tank would make it easier to lower emissions while raising performance. So, what made them choose small tanks and cheating on emissions? The reasons for this blew my mind. It weren't the engineers or even the bean counters that mandated this, it were the marketing guys. A large tank is more expensive than a small one and takes up more room. So sales experts opposed large tanks because they preferred using the space for loudspeakers of high-end stereo systems, which could be sold to customers as expensive options. The 5 automakers decided to coordinate efforts and limit the size of AdBlue tanks. They agreed to use tanks between 17 to 23 liters, which would be produced by only 2 manufacturers and designed so that customers wouldn't have to refill them between scheduled maintenance visits. But not all car makers were committed enough, and some used larger tanks, so development heads met again. Deciding that cooperation was urgent, they agreed on an escalation mechanism and put driveline managers and chassis managers in charge. They started applying pressure to agree on a single size and a single supplier for all tanks. After several meetings, Daimler, Audi, VW, and BMW agreed on an 8-liter tank for all vehicles. The problem is that if enough AdBlue is used to reach the required emissions levels, 8 liters of AdBlue are not even enough for a range of 3,700 miles. A decision this big can only be made by top management, so the resolution was escalated upwards, and a commitment was made by managers at the executive level. What started with mid-level marketing MBAs wanting to save a few bucks and use the tank's space for upgraded subwoofers grew into a collusion framework with organized working groups, subgroups, and escalation mechanism to force all companies to comply, and top management MBAs signing a deal with the devil. Let's see how this was accepted. The decision to use small tanks led to initial doubts with U.S. regulators, which demanded that the tanks contain enough urea to last between 10,000-mile inspections. Some regulations are extremely stupid, but in this case, it really makes sense. The regulators knew very well that most owners would never refill the tanks unless forced to, and so the cars would drive most of the time, spewing filthy particles. The automakers responded with irritation. A dispute erupted among the departments at each company, and there were heated debates in the secret circle of 5 meetings. Engineers in all companies agreed that to satisfy U.S. requirements, a minimum tank volume of 19 liters was required. But the marketing departments felt that such tanks were too heavy and too large. Eventually, the marketing and sales departments had prevailed, with all companies agreeing on 8-liter tanks for Europe and 16-liter tanks for the US market. Meanwhile, even stricter regulations were introduced, which increased the amount of AdBlue required by up to 50% and turned the target tank sizes into a bad joke. No one could expect customers to be reminded to refill the urea mixture every 1,200 to 1,800 miles. None of the players hit upon the obvious idea of installing larger tanks, thereby attaining the competitive advantage of being able to market cleaner cars. On the contrary, in a May 2014 email, Audi urgently warned against any company going it alone. The need to inject larger and larger amounts of AdBlue into the exhaust gas system, Audi wrote, could expand into an arms race with regard to tank sizes, which we should continue to avoid at all costs. Moreover, if one manufacturer had installed larger tanks, authorities could become suspicious about why one company needs so much AdBlue while the others make do with significantly less. By now, the primal sin of deciding to coordinate tank sizes had grown into a monster. It prevented the companies from doing the right thing and meeting emissions regulations, and it tied them together in a bond of deceit. The 5 companies were sworn to secrecy, each hoping that none of the others spills the beans. The companies could not risk one of them breaking ranks and using larger AdBlue tanks. Some had already begun deceiving licensing authorities and customers about the true emissions from their cars. VW and Audi installed cheat software that detected when a car was in a testing facility and injected additional AdBlue during that short period of time. In September 2015, U.S. authorities discovered the deception, which started the shitstorm called Dieselgate. All 5 companies were found guilty of collusion and fined hundreds of millions or even billions of euro. VW and Daimler were fined for using defeat devices, and while BMW was never charged for cheating on emissions, they did recall almost 12,000 cars with incorrectly installed emissions software. I wonder what this means. But emissions were just the tip of a giant collusion iceberg. The 5 automakers colluded on just about everything, and this is where we will see why M cars sucked from the noughties until recent years. As Volkswagen admitted to cartel authorities, there was an exchange of internal, competitively sensitive technical data. The 5 manufacturers had jointly established technical standards and had agreed to use only certain technical solutions in new vehicles. For example, none of the manufacturers was to step so far ahead of the others with a new model that they would have problems selling their own vehicles. A manufacturer could introduce groundbreaking technology only if the others were capable of quickly offering the technology to their own customers. In other words, it's bye-bye competition and bye-bye progress through technology. The 5 automakers started taking baby steps, doing their best not to outrun the other companies.
The quality changed, definitely. And it was the engineering was limited from the management.
The modern cars which are produced now, they will find their end in about 15 or maximum 20 years. Different than these cars. These cars you can drive for eternity.
50 years ago, the marketing didn't play a big role in product planning and product decisions. So it was indeed the engineers on the R&D side and also on the production side who steered the product range and product planning. And certainly they looked in the first place about good engineering quality.
Living in a glass house, some members started having qualms. Daimler asked its legal advisors to examine the issue, and the law firm expressed considerable concerns that problems could arise. The managers repeatedly recognized that their agreements could be illegal. The Diesel Engines Working Group removed the last 2 pages of a September 2011 presentation regarding the development of a special sensor with feedback from Daimler. An email reads, "A review of the document with the legal department led to serious concerns in terms of cartel law." Another meeting of the working group, the BMW representative had asked, "Who would be interested in proving that we are in violation of cartel law?" The Daimler representative responded, "Mainly the Exchange Supervisory Authority." He added that Daimler had also engaged outside auditors who have access to everything. Another participant said, "Our agreement that a sensor needs to be developed is not the critical issue, but the joint definition of the supplier is." They knew that specifying which suppliers to use was illegal, Yet they did this anyway. The collusion was also problematic in terms of cartel law when the Circle of Five exchanged information about major suppliers. The Pneumatic Suspension Working Group held meetings to discuss supplier performance, and especially ZF, one of the largest suppliers to the industry. Such agreements could deprive individual suppliers of the opportunity to receive orders from Daimler, BMW, Audi, Porsche, and Volkswagen. This too could be in violation of cartel law. Given the large number of working groups, the employees sometimes lost their ability to consider the bigger picture. When members of the clutch working group discussed at what stage a vehicle's parking lock should be activated, one attendee suggested that they clarify whether a standstill management working group already exists. This is a great example of how easy it is to go astray when employees focus on perfecting their tasks without observing the big picture. A more recent example is VW's Cariad blunder, where 10,000 software developers wrote millions of lines of code, yet failed to deliver a good operating system. The companies sold us a facade of intense competition and how stepping on each other's toes improves their cars. But reality was very different. Behind closed doors, they specifically agreed that no toe-stepping would occur. The companies existed in two different worlds. In the hidden world, the companies cooperated in a lively give and take, while in the public world, the one of auto shows and car magazines, the automakers acted as if they were in fierce competition. You know the routine. For example, commenting in a major auto show on the latest Audi, a BMW developer told reporters that the Audi already looks as old as its predecessor. The five companies kept this duality secret for many years, but eventually, both Daimler and Volkswagen gave authorities detailed accounts of the collusion. They did so under pressure, fearing they were about to be exposed. In an unrelated investigation against a steel cartel, the Federal Cartel Office conducted searches at 6 companies. They seized computers, hard drives, and files where they found evidence regarding the auto cartel. Once the ball started rolling, Volkswagen scrambled to make any records it had regarding the cartel available to authorities. They hoped to emerge from the affair unpunished by revealing everything and becoming the whistleblower to its old partners. Meanwhile, Daimler did the same. They too came clean, and as cartel authorities wouldn't reveal which of the two companies was quicker to self-incriminate, VW and Daimler, finally in real competition with each other, provided their fullest cooperation. When the dust settled, it was revealed that Daimler acted first and received full immunity from getting fined. The VW group received a 45% discount and were only fined 502 million euros. And with no discount, BMW was fined 373 million euros. At this point in my journey, collusion within industries doesn't surprise me as much as it used to. But if I wasn't shocked to learn about the working groups, why did I start this video saying that I feel betrayed? I did so because going down the rabbit hole, I was appalled by the pervasive corruption that I discovered. You won't believe how dirty things are. This web of deceit spans from materials suppliers and parts suppliers to automobile manufacturers and even regulatory bodies. There is stench and rot everywhere, and the sad part is that the ones paying for this corruption are consumers like you and me. I want this chapter to be very quick, so I'll run through each of its 3 sections. First, I'll show why this huge corruption is hidden and rarely makes headlines. Then, I'll show how pervasive the corruption really is. And finally, I'll show how much you and I overpaid for our cars due to this corruption. The numbers are shocking. Upon reading the Spiegel article, I wondered why Dieselgate is so widely known, but nobody discussed the massive collusion that allegedly took place in topics other than emissions. I mean, if the Spiegel article is correct, then these guys agreed on which suppliers to use and on not developing any technologies that the others cannot meet. They went so deep into details that even a standstill management working group seemed logical to them. Things don't get more detailed than that. But digging deeper into this topic, I realized that the real question wasn't why nobody had discussed the other collusion, but rather why Dieselgate did get published. You see, most cases are not found, and those that are get buried in the sidelines. Another Spiegel article, which I won't go into, but there's a link in the description, provides documents showing that the European Commission and member states knew since 2010 at the latest that the extremely harmful emissions from diesel cars were strikingly higher than legal levels. Why then didn't they act on it until Dieselgate blew up in the States? Part of it was teammanship and belonging to the same club. The story is filled with anecdotes such as how when visiting VW's headquarters in 2010, the European Commissioner for Industry Antonio Tajani received a present, a Wolfsburg Football Club jersey signed by the players. Wolfsburg was then the German football champion, and considering how in a post-visit letter Tajani described VW as undoubtedly one of the pillars of German industry and thanked VW for the jersey, it seems that getting the jersey was a big deal. But it goes much deeper. The automobile industry is a huge force in many economies, and regulators don't want to see them hurt. Regulators like the European Commission do charge companies for illegal trade practices, but almost all cases are closed via settlement and include keeping details of the case confidential. I believe that because Dieselgate was so big, regulators didn't want to add oil to the flames by pressing charges for collusion. By agreeing to settle on emissions without getting charged for collusion, companies like BMW, for example, could publicly announce that, with the withdrawal of most of the original allegations, BMW's board has agreed to a settlement proposed by the European Commission that will bring these proceedings to an end. This ensured that, besides paying a fine, the company would save face without having its customers learn that the ultimate driving machine had agreed not to develop any breakthrough technologies. If colluding companies get fined without making headlines, how many cases are there? The answer is a lot. A huge fucking lot. I don't want to waste time on this, but the European Commission has fined companies at all levels of the automotive sector. It found cartels in the production of bearings, wiring harnesses, alternators and starters, air conditioning and engine cooling, safety equipment, many things more than once, by the way, starter batteries, door modules and window actuators, spark plugs, braking systems, maritime carriers that transport cars on ro-ro ships, car dealers, car manufacturers. The list goes on, but you get the picture. There is rotten stench everywhere. According to capitalism, competition works to provide buyers with the best value for their money, and a key role of government is to enforce competition laws and prevent the formation of cartels. Cartels undermine the free market by eliminating competition, which leads to higher prices and lesser quality products for consumers. With German car makers committing to produce polluting cars and avoid developing any breakthrough technologies, it is clear that collusion provides lesser quality products. But how much does collusion affect prices? The consulting company AlixPartners calculated that around 25 to 30% of a car's costs for automotive manufacturers are caused by illegal price fixing of the suppliers. The collusive methods used by automotive suppliers are extensive and range from price fixing and bid rigging to allocation of markets, redistribution of supplying contracts, and exchange of sensitive information. Substantial cartelization runs throughout the whole automotive supplier industry and can be found among small specialized third-tier and second-tier suppliers, as well as among large first-tier suppliers. The average price of a new car in America is now $48,000. Assuming the 25 to 30% overhead in a car's cost were rolled onto the consumer, this means that without collusion, the average price should have been around $38,000. Only $38,000 are paid for the car, and an extra $10,000 are paid for corruption. And that's from suppliers alone, without figuring in the additional collusion by car companies and dealers. Let this sink in. My friends, I feel betrayed. How about you? Let me know below what you think. Also, please write your experience with German cars and which M3 model or other German car is your favorite. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Consider supporting me on patreon.com/connectingadots for as little as $1 a month. Your support really helps me make these deep dive videos, and you'll also get ad-free early access to my videos, as well as exclusive patron-only content. Don't forget to check out Raycon, the sponsor of this video, at buyraycon.com/ctdots to get 20% off the everyday earbuds. Let's talk on X, so follow me there, where I am connecting O-Dots. Until next time, I am connecting the dots, and you are amazing.
When you're up against the wall and you cannot fall, so go off, go off, go off.